Life is not meant to be sprinted the entire time. In fact, if you sprint too long, you're going to burn out. And it's okay to stop. You don't have to hustle, grind, and push all the time.
Maybe you're feeling stuck right now. Well, this week's guest is here to share with us how to get the F unstuck. As she explains in detail, her journey has not been short of obstacles, challenges, and dark moments. Let me introduce you to the firecracker of a human being who's changing the lives of many, the energetic and fabulous Loz Antonenko.
If you want to live an unstoppable life, it's about finding balance and equilibrating your energy channels constantly.
As the founder of Loz Life, she's the author of 2 books, a healthy habit coach, personal trainer, speaker, motivational maven, and mojo mentor, including how she's learned to embrace her ADHD diagnosis and use it as a superpower to her advantage.
Success is about showing up even when you can't. Success is about using every single resource at your disposal, even the ones you didn't realize that were there, to put the effort in.
Loz, welcome to share.
Oh, how are you? It's an honor and a pleasure having a chat.
Oh, how visually good is that background?
Well, it pops. You can't
Yeah.
say I'm not extra, put it that way.
You don't like pink?
I never used to. I used to be a blue person, yeah.
Yeah.
Funny, hey, how pink, the colours find you.
Yeah. Well, pink definitely suits. So
Thank you.
now, Loz, we kind of interact in some similar circles. And when I started the podcast, people, kept saying to me, "Have you met Loz? Have you met Loz? Have you met Loz? Do you know much about Loz?" And so I wrote your name down. And it's great to have you on for an episode because obviously there's a lot of people out there that say you gotta chat to Loz.
Yeah, well, it's what happens, divine timing, I always say.
Yeah. It's funny, actually. A lot of people say to me, "How do you find your guests? How do you select your guests?" And I'm like, I'm drawn to them. Sometimes people reach out to me and I'll be like, it's not quite the right fit right now, or it doesn't feel quite right, and then like 2 months down the track, sometimes it's like, hey, you up for that chat now? So it's all about, that's how I work anyway, is that kind of drawn to people and drawn to topics, themes, and that's how the universe works.
Love it, and that's the best way to do it serendipitously, I reckon.
Yeah. So who is Loz?
Well, Loz is new. Like Loz has been hidden inside this body, I think, since I was very small. But, in essence, I started going by the name Loz. So my name's actually Lauren, and for most of my life, I went by that name. But Loz kind of is an acronym for lots of zest. And it was a nickname I'd been given as a child. Absolutely hated it. Hated the nickname Loz. If you call me Loz, I wasn't your mate. Only family would call me Loz, and it was a term of endearment that I hated. But I guess, Steve, embodying what Loz represents, it's this constant strive for living an unstoppable life. And despite going through challenges day in, day out with health and lifestyle and career, and understanding that life is literally just full of hard work, uncertainty, and pain. It was that realization that once you face those 3 things with utmost integrity and a desire to want more from your life, it's much easier to navigate the challenges that life gives you when it gives you a shitty situation, and that you can live an unstoppable life no matter how hard it seems to be at the time. And that's what Loz represents. It's Loz, I am a life enthusiast. A lycra-loving, badass life enthusiast with ADHD, an OG ADHD from back in the 90s, actually. I was diagnosed with ADD before it was even cool.
Yep. Yeah, well, it seems to be a little bit of a trend, and I don't say that to offend anyone, but obviously, everyone now is like, I've got ADHD. As I always say, I think if you look at the symptoms of ADHD, I think we're all on the spectrum.
Agreed. And my biggest concern with that is I find that a lot of middle-aged people who are seeking a positive diagnosis of ADHD, a lot of the time the distraction they are encountering and embodying is actually more about a misalignment of their values with the actions that they take every day. And I would argue, as somebody who has been neurodivergent their whole life, who's not fitted in much, found their place definitely now. But, well, actually, the place found me. I think that if a lot of people did a little bit more work and realizing that it is a case of a misalignment and a misdirection and a misguidance. A lot of those symptoms of, impulsivity and reactionary measures that you take when you do have ADHD side quests. You're just speaking, oh, I'm having a side quest right now. A lot of that can be negated by a simple alignment. Now, I'm more aligned than I've ever been in my entire life. I'm about to turn 40. And it's interesting because I reflect on even the past 10 years of lived experience on finding this identity, finding this truth, finding this personality and this zest for life that I'd never actually encountered before. And I'm realizing, oh my gosh, like this is actually what it feels like. Yet I'm so focused. I get a lot done. I'm a highly productive person. As you said when we actually hopped on here off air, are you on a treadmill? I get that all the time. I'm all about, not life hacks, but simplify to amplify. How can we make things so simple that you do it? And so this is how I get my steps in when I'm on interviews. It's a simple measure. It's like, well, I'm just going to be sitting on my butt. I may as well do things. Now people will go, oh, that's so ADHD. But it's like, it's actually efficient. I'm all about efficiency and ways that we can optimize the way that we live our lives to get outcomes that are more conducive to high performance, if that makes sense.
Yep, completely. And I always say with ADHD as well, or whatever, we're all unique human beings, right? It's about working out. And someone said to me one day, we're not born with like a manual, right? An instruction manual. We're all different. We're all unique. And I think when you look at ADHD, and it's talked about a lot, as I said, it's very trendy and it's kind of like, it's out there. I kind of think that for anyone that thinks, wow, I've got ADHD, or they get diagnosed with ADHD, it's about not seeing it as a negative thing, but how can you actually use that as a superpower?
Yeah, I had that on earrings. It says ADHD is my superpower.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
it's a great conversation starter because I feel that, neurotypical people, they find people who are on a spectrum of sorts, whether it's the autistic spectrum or the greater neurodivergent spectrum. They don't quite understand how to handle people that are like, blah, blah, or people who have autism who might be the opposite of that. And so when you are a spectrum-based individual who identifies as going, you know what, like, it's great, actually. It's not using it as an excuse and externalizing the blame to other things as the woes for all your entire life. Because I think that the biggest negative connotation is that, we're using labels, right? And I think labels can be useful in terms of creating a context around certain situations, individuals, and emotions. Because when we have that experience, putting that frame of reference around it's like, actually, that person is not just being a bitch or they're not ignoring me. Actually, that person has autism, or that person isn't distracted and they're not interested in my conversation. They have ADHD and they're already thinking like 2 sentences ahead. You know what I mean? And I think it helps us to provide context. But the flip side of that coin, though, Steve, is that a lot of people use it as a mechanical way of explaining away the reason why they don't have things in their life or why things are the way that they are. And I call bullshit on that, because you can be fabulous and amazing and you can embrace these things as your superpower. And I'm living proof of that. I guess when people get to work with somebody like me, they get to experience, not just in the context of neurodivergence, but in the context of going through lots of challenging situations. I mean, there are so many things that I think I've had to manage and overcome at a very short and, early part of my life. Some of the things that I've had to navigate, people don't navigate until they're much older. I'm talking in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But the allowance of that and the understanding that all of these things happen for you, not to you, enables you to realize that you have the capacity to live a great life. You have to accept that life is not linear, especially with ADHD, because if you've got little side projects and stuff. But, that's actually where the stuff is. I mean, that's the juice. That's the bit that we need. That's the bit that actually makes us learn and grow. It is that experience. And, without being too cliche, which I'm about to be, but it is about the journey and it's not about the destination. And you only learn that through wisdom. And, you only learn that through hindsight as well. But then you get to embrace it if you choose. whatever it is that you're going through and allow it to be the thing that helps refine you rather than define you.
Yep. So with ADHD, Loz, obviously there might be some people listening here going, oh, what's ADHD? I'd be very surprised. I think most people know now what it is, but some people wouldn't kind of fully understand it. So can you describe, what does ADHD mean for you?
Well, I was actually diagnosed with ADD. Now, they never used to put the H in. There used to be two different types. There used to be attention deficit disorder and then attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Mhm.
So I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD, but they've actually gotten rid of ADD and they've just labeled everybody ADHD. I just thought everybody was like the way that I was. I didn't realize that, oh, okay, that isn't neurotypical. I mean, you weren't even using that language back in the 90s. And being a female as well, in the 90s, the people that were being diagnosed were like the naughty boys at the back of the room throwing, pegging stuff at the teacher. I wasn't that kid. In fact, I wouldn't even consider that I was a hyperactive kid. I was inquisitive and I was curious and I loved to do lots of things. I found myself drawn to things like theatre and music and performance-based thing where it was really right brain activities. But I was quite left-brained because I grew up in a family with a military father and a nurse mum. And everything was very structured and routine and orderly. Like making your bed was, you got in trouble. You got reprimanded actually quite heavily. But I just, as a kid, you don't see the world through anybody else's eyes. And growing up, I didn't realize that that wasn't just the life that everybody else had. I reflect back on that now and I realize that I got in trouble quite a lot from my dad. My dad was very hard on me. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. And I don't think I realized this until we relocated it as being in the military, he'd get like houses and things like that as part of what you get when you're in service. But we relocated and I changed schools. I think I was about 7. And I went from being just a regular kid with lots of friends doing choir and weird things to not fitting in at all. Changing schools really was a big kicker for me. And I really didn't have a big friendship circle. In fact, I was bullied a lot as a kid, like so much. I'm so grateful that the internet didn't exist in its capacity that we have now because there would have been no escaping it. I was picked on for being smart. I was picked on for being weird. I was picked on for having a big nose. I was picked on for having a big bum. I was picked on for not developing boobs. I was just picked on for everything, like anything. Kids are shitheads. Like, kids are horrible. Kids are horrible. Kids are terrible. But
Well, kids don't understand. That's the problem.
of course. Kids don't understand. And we say that, kids this. But when you're in it as a child, you just think, oh, all kids are terrible. This is horrible. And for me, though, that was a real catalyst to go, okay, well, if I'm not going to be defined through popularity, I'll just immerse myself in these other external worlds. So I found myself drawn to theatre where I got to embody other characters and things like that. And it's interesting. The friends that I picked up, I had a very small group of friends. We were friends all the way up until, the mid 2000 and teens, right? Very, very long time. And I maintained those beautiful, deep friendship connections from when I changed schools. But it's interesting because I tried so hard to fit in. I tried so hard. I remember going for house captain and I had this beautiful speech prepared. I put a lot of effort into it. And then, I prepared this speech and I delivered this speech very eloquently. And I gave myself a big pat on the back for how well I executed it. And the next person to come up said, I don't do long speeches, and gave this like 10-second speech and then got captain. And I was so upset about how unfair that felt. So it's been this real struggle, I think, having ADHD and neurodivergence, because you get so obsessed with things. You get really, really hyperfixated on things, which in itself is a curse and a blessing because it enables you to become quite proficient and develop confidence and competence in lots of areas. I mean, for me, the way that's manifested is as a hyperachiever, right? Like I spent a lifetime just mastering all of these different skill sets. I have a very odd skill set. I actually have a degree in IT. People don't know that about me because my brain is so programmed to think very logically, but always that longing for right-brained activities, which is exploring creativity. I think in order to fit in, I did suppress a lot of that for a very long time. And as an adult, it's only been in really recent years, if I'm very honest, when I started to become Loz, and there was a catalyst for change that basically pushed that, which we can go into. But it was this second chance to explore who that could be, what that felt like to try on these different guises again. And although at first it felt like imposter syndrome or whatever way we want to label that, I think that really finding what that felt like and taking bits from here and bits from here and going, okay, like pink, like, oh my God, I wanted to be a boy most of my life. People don't know that about me, but no, I'm serious. Like, if I was growing up now, that could be a whole different conversation. But I was just so not a girl. And my mum used to shop for me for boys' clothes and stuff. I mean, who would have thought all of these years later that is such a distant memory now at the end of that spectrum? And we are such fluid creatures. And I think when we look at ADHD, it is not a curse. It is a spectrum. As you said, most people are on some sort of spectrum. We're on spectrums for various things. So, understanding that there are highs, there are lows, there are fluctuations, there is a dynamic nature to the way that you are as an energetic being. You are a human being, not a human doing. And I think structure for me, as a child, I'd really struggled with structure, even though I thrived to some capacity because I didn't know any other way of being. As an adult, I am quite unstructured in the way that I live my life. I did try a highly structured routine for a period, and I'm very susceptible to burnout because it doesn't allow me to honor those energetic fluctuations that I experience from hour to hour. In fact, I have other complex medical issues as well, which I'm managing, which are a big part of how I ended up in the fitness and health industry as an expert. But I guess honoring that truth of, okay, well, today I have non-negotiables, and this is how I sort of structure. There's 5, and this is part of the paradigm that I sort of educate people with my concept of handbrake habits. And that is my eating, my breathing, my sleep, my movement, and my hydration. As long as those things are met to a high standard, because I want a high standard, for average person would just be to a bare minimum baseline standard, then my job is done. All of the other things slot around those 5 non-negotiables. So very important that my eating is always optimal. I mean, I just had food before I hopped on this call. And, if you have a look at my plate, the way I structure that as a nutritional advisor, so I understand how to do that, my breathing, I always make sure that I'm nose breathing because a lot of the time I'm having these verbal exchanges with people on a daily basis. I'm breathing out of my mouth right now. So it's very important not engaging in conversation to focus on nasal breathing and in my sleep. And the same goes for the other 3. So, I'm always sipping on no, this is not vodka. It was a repurposed vodka bottle, but always having my water. I mean, my water intake is phenomenal, and moving mindfully, which is why you'll find me on a treadmill or a walking pad, when I'm doing more passive activities. And then my sleep kind of caps that off at the end of the day, because making sure that I get sleep, and I monitor everything. I use things like Oura rings and other wearable devices. But I use all of this now with my clients because it helps me as a neurodivergent individual to create really objective data around really subjective emotions, because I really struggle to stay connected with my body because I'm always like, oh, next thing, next thing, next thing. It's been really important in me finding that high performance to marry that objective and subjective data so I can make an informed decision about what it is that I need to do. So non-negotiables, I really, really loathe routines. I hate it when I have to do things at a certain time that aren't conducive to the goals and the life that I want to live. But I also understand that sometimes they're necessary, especially if you're getting paid to do something.
Yep.
But that's the way that I sort of navigated it. So I think that is kind of my reflections on having ADHD. I don't take medication. I did take medication from 1998 to around 2009. So about 11 years. And I realized that it was kind of augmenting my personality. And it was augmenting my relationship with food, like extremely. And I would binge a lot and then I'd forget to eat. I mean, the old me was completely unrecognizable compared to who you see today. But, I have not been medicated. And so this is my challenge, is that people seeking positive diagnosis, the only solution to that is once you've got a diagnosis is then, okay, well, they're going to put you on medication. So unless you anticipate that you want to be on medication, there is no real need to be diagnosed, because that is the intervention that our system will put in place for you. That is a pharmacological intervention. But, if you live your life according to your values and your goals where they are in congruence, you'll find that a lot of those symptoms, you can manage those very effectively by having non-negotiables and putting structures in place for yourself so that you feel like you're actually getting shit done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Now, Loz, you've spoken, obviously, kind of Loz 2.0 or 3.0. I don't know what version you're up to.
Continuum. It's a continuum.
And a continuum. What do they call iOS software? But, what kind of volume you're up to. But tell me about some of these challenges. Tell me some about these, kind of sliding door moments that have kind of shifted you into, the Loz that we see today.
You want to strap yourself in for this one?
Okay.
So as a child, I was exposed to toxic mold, and I didn't realize this until I was an adult. But where my bedroom was in my family home, my dad, planted all these plants around our house, and my room was very musky. And then, my parents are split. My mum has gone to renovate the house, and the room's been full of mold. And so that happened without me knowing. I was never an unwell child. When I was very small, I suffered from chronic bronchitis. And then I wasn't really sick. But at the end of year 12, we had a breakup, and they had pizza, and the pizza went cold and got reheated, went cold, and I ate it and I got food poisoning. And that was a moment in time that would take me on this journey to where I am now. Throughout university, I got a scholarship into University for Information Technology because at the time I was in a minority group. I really struggled to fit in at university as well, and I changed degrees about 5 times in 3 years. But about halfway through that first degree, I was about 1.5 years in, I started getting very, very unwell. And the guy that I was with, who I'd end up marrying, he was with me, and he started to watch my fatigue escalate. I then got diagnosed with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. Now, this version of me, at that point in time, wasn't necessarily very proactive about their health. I was, just eating. I was a uni student. I was up late night in the IT lab eating pizza, drinking Coke. I had V's because V's are really big, and Red Bulls, and lots of coffee, lots of carbs. I'd binge eat a whole packet of Monte Carlo because, there was no regard for any of this stuff, just eating healthily-ish. And they diagnosed me with these 2 things, and then I started pooping blood. It was very, very scary. I thought I had bowel cancer, and my weight rapidly started to plummet. I then got taken to hospital, and they did a whole heap of investigative surgery. And at the same time, I was having problems with my reproductive system as well, like polycystic ovaries and lots of pain through my periods. So they diagnosed me with a condition called ulcerative colitis, which is a form of inflammatory bowel disease. And I remember looking it up on the internet before I went in, going, I hope that's not what I have, because it would be a life sentence. And I do recall waking up from sedation, and he goes, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, okay, what's the bad news? And he goes, you have ulcerative colitis. I bawled my eyes out. I said, so what's the good news? He goes, well, at least we know what you've got. So I know, right? I was like, oh, that's pretty harsh. So the solution for that in the mainstream medical model was to tell me that perhaps a gluten-free diet could be useful for me just to help calm down the inflammation. And they dosed me up to the eyeballs and all these medications, including corticosteroid drugs, slapped me on the bum and sent me home. And so over a 6-month period, I gained about 26.5 kilos. I felt like absolute shit. All of my fatigue went through the roof. I was so tired. I actually had to make a decision about whether to continue with my university studies or defer them for a period while I worked on myself. And I remember how angry my dad was. Like, he couldn't understand why I would turn up all these opportunities for all this. I was on scholarships constantly because I was a smart kid. And I had to make the decision to defer my university degrees. And you could see sort of towards when I started getting sick, my study started to decline, and my results started to decline. Like, I went from a straight 7 student and I was getting 3s. And you could see something wasn't right. So I spent 6 months. I went, worked casually and got my health on track. And, the bleeding stopped, the symptoms stopped. But I started feeling like crap. I gained all this weight. But my doctor said, you look, okay, well, at least you're not poop and blood anymore. You put your disease into remission. You're just going to have to get used to this person. And so 26.5 kilos heavy. I hated myself, started to medicate with alcohol and marijuana. And, I basically lived like that for about 8 years. So I went back to university, completed my studies in 2007, got married to the love of my life, Brian, in 2010, on the 10th of the 10th, 2010, and started a business straight out of university with my dad, because I was at a point in my life, Steve, where because I had chronic fatigue and I was so tired all the time, I just couldn't slap myself out of this fatigue. I didn't think that I could actually work for anybody. I really didn't have any confidence that I would be a useful employee. And I got given these 2 great opportunities straight out of university. I actually changed degrees, ended up with a weird degree. But I had to turn those opportunities down because I just was like, I just can't. I just don't think I can do that. So I started a business with my dad in 2007, selling mobility equipment in our town in Ipswich. And so we set up a bricks and mortar store. Neither of us had any retail experience whatsoever, but I had this really weird skill set. So I actually built our computer towers. I designed all of our websites. I did all of the bookkeeping. I did all of the marketing. I did all the press releases. I did all of the admin, answered the phone. And my dad, being an ex-airframe engineer, he did all of the repairs for all of the equipment, so mechanical and electrical repairs. So we did that for a while. And, my health side went up and down. I then got diagnosed with a condition called polycystic ovaries and another condition called PMDD. In fact, I got that many medical acronyms after my name that, I shouldn't have to remember them all. It's ridiculous. So that was my life for a period of time. I then got diagnosed with a brain tumor. So a tumor on my pituitary gland. I had these really unpleasant symptoms, and they put me on a medication to shrink that. And that was in 2014. And then in 2015, I had this string of events that happened over 6 months that would absolutely push my life into the opposite direction. Thing number 1 is that my dad hit me in the face at work. Now, this is a guy I'd engineered my entire life, all of my belief systems, all of my high achievements around his expectations, because I knew as a child at a very young age, as soon as I did well, my dad would praise me and tell me that he loved me. If I didn't do well, he wouldn't. So that was the first thing that happened. That proceeded to him divorcing my mum, taking me to court, hitting me up for all of these charges. Like it just escalated so quickly because I was like the scapegoat for some reason, being the shadow for my dad.
Loz,
and that was
can I ask on that though? What was the catalyst for that?
So my dad was having an affair, and he was already emotionally unstable. My dad definitely has undiagnosed autism. Now, he got diagnosed with ADHD, but I think he might be autistic ADHD, because if anything doesn't go to plan, he can't cope. So there was a bedpan in our shop that didn't have a price on it. I was on the phone to a customer, and he goes, "This bedpan doesn't have a price. How much is it?" I said, "Look at the ones behind." Try not to be rude to the customer. "Look at the ones behind. They have prices on them." And he got his nose so out of joint, it went from that thing to him smashing everything off the desk, kicking all of the displays over, walking out of the shop, because that's how he would de-escalate. But then he came back and started being abusive. And I said, "Look, I'm going to leave." And as I walked out, he backhanded me across the face. Now, he doesn't know this because him and I haven't talked since this moment. But
You haven't talked since that moment?
No. So he actually moved my jaw so heavy. I've just spent $15,000 getting like jaw expansion surgery and all of these things because I've got permanently clicky jaw. He has no idea. I then actually had to take a DVO out of my dad. It took me a month. So a month after that incident, he harassed me. He would write me letters. He would write me emails. I had to block him. He would send me text messages. I had to block him. He went to my husband, Brian. Brian blocked him. He went to my friends. And it got to a stage where I actually couldn't handle this toxic energy. And I look back on that now. My dad's the biggest teacher I've ever had. My dad has been the greatest teacher. I look back at that, and that's all his stuff, right? But because I didn't have any coping skills, because this was my first experience of real challenge, a real big ass situation, I didn't have the skills to know to cope. Now, thank God I had an amazing psychologist at this time, because what would happen 6 months later, on 2 days after my 31st birthday, my husband Brian committed suicide.
Oh, no.
And it was the best, worst thing that has ever happened to me in my life. Because all at once it made me realize that if my life was going nowhere, then that's exactly where it would end. And my life was kind of just really predictable, vanilla, beige existence. And a month after that, my grandfather died. So I had all these male role models in my life because I was very, very yang energy, very business orientated. I mean, I'm very connected with the business community where I live. That's all come from that. And all of that got taken away. That all like left my life. And so the day after my husband died, I just tried to get on with my life. I was doing pole fitness at the time, or trying to do pole fitness, whatever that looks like. And I just rocked up and they're like, how's your day been? Oh, my husband died. They're like, why are you here? I'm like, just, like, you don't understand. Like, I have to find some continuity right now. And so where that took me was to the gym. And my psychologist said, like, right now, this stuff that you're going through, these emotions you're managing, they're going to take time to process. I mean, my dad was taking me to court. My husband's family then also wanted his whole estate. So then they were going through lawyers. I had these 2 legal cases. I'd inherited $750,000 worth of debt in an instant. The instant my husband passed away. And so she said, you got to go find something that you can do that's just this continuous thing. And so I actually started going to the gym properly. I'd kind of pretended to gym up to that point. And so I would go like half an hour before closing time, be on the treadmill like I am now, no eye contact. And the only other people that are in the gym at that time of night were sweaty, grunty, middle-aged men. And so for a couple of weeks I did that. And then one of these lovely volunteers in the gym, who was one of those sweaty, grunty, middle-aged, well, he's a bit older than that, middle-aged men, he said, hey, I knew your husband really well. He's a really nice guy. I see you there and you're really lonely. Would you like to come down and I'll teach you how to lift weights? And I remember looking at those guys going, if I'm going to look, sound, and smell like that, absolutely not. And he said, no, you can't, because you don't have like male hormones. So you're just going to be toned. I'm like, okay, I don't really know what you mean by that. And this was that real moment in time where you've got that sliding door opportunity, because the next night, instead of beelining for the treadmill, I went down to the gym floor. And over a period of time, I went from, like, he taught me to lift old school weights, just with dumbbells, really good technique. This guy, he brought out Arnold Schwarzenegger's compendium of the friggin' body. Like, he's real old school, right? I still see this guy. He's in his 80s now. I see him, visit him. He lives not far from me. And I then started talking to these guys in the gym, and I realized that they were having conversations about things I'd never had conversations with in my circles. They're talking about goal setting, personal development, nutrition. I'm like, what is this shit? Yeah, I got introduced to podcasts. I got introduced to Tony Robbins. I can see you got Unshakable behind you there. And I was like, what is this world? Like, it was extraordinary, actually, Steve. And so within 6 months, I've made some cultural shifts. I've made some physical shifts in my body. I'd lost all my weight. I was feeling really good. And I decided to do the most rational thing I could think of, which was a bodybuilding show. Because my husband, Brian, he wanted to do a bodybuilding show, but he didn't have the confidence. He was Chinese, Ukrainian. So I still have his last name. Antonenko is my husband's last name. And I have a tattoo down my back, which you can't see, but it's Chinese and it says, I never give up. I got that after he died because he used to have it on his tricep. So this turned into this other version of Loz. So over a period of about 18 months, hired a coach, I did 13 shows. So most people do one show every 3 to 4 years. It was actually about 14 months, actually. So I did 13 shows in 14 months. It was going to be 14 shows in 14 months for no particular reason. It was easy to stay in condition. Unfortunately, what happened is that I became so embroiled in this toxic energy that is the fitness culture, the influencer culture. I had 100,000 followers on Instagram. I was posting tits and ass shots, and I was getting externally validated for all of these things that I was doing. I was counting every single calorie to the gram that I consumed, and I was expending a lot of energy, and I was maintaining a very, very unrealistic normal life. 7 hours of the day was spent on social media. 3 hours a day was spent working out in the gym. I had the mobility business that I had to continue. Even though my dad left, I employed somebody else who had become my second husband, who I actually met at the gym. And it was odd because I kind of had to grow up in one part of my life with my business, and I had to put employees on because my other life was pulling me into it, and I was still sort of working in the business, but I had this other thing that was going on. It wasn't being monetized. On my last show, I remember I really wanted a glass of wine, and my coach said to me, babe, why don't you think about snorting cocaine because there's no calories in that? And there was this penny drop in my brain. It's like, what the fuck am I in? Like, what is this environment? And the universe would just miraculously intervene, as it does, because the reason I couldn't do my 14th show is actually my ulcerative colitis came back, and I was pooping blood, and I was really sick, and I was losing weight. And if you actually look at pictures of me at that last show, I was so skin and bone. I was about 10% body fat. There wasn't much left of me. I was very, very unwell. And I'm posting all these pictures on Instagram and I'm getting all these followers, I'm getting all these likes. And Mick, who I'm married to now, he goes, well, like, what are you even doing this for? Like, what are you getting out of this? And I actually couldn't answer the question. And so I went cold turkey off Instagram. I stopped posting all that stuff. I started to decide to reinvigorate my intellectual capacity and I started studying. So I became a personal trainer in my 30s. And then I realized PTs couldn't talk to people about real life problems. And so then I became a life coach. I then studied nutritional modification, cognitive behavioral therapy, TFT, EFT. It's 13 different modalities. So I'm across 13 different modalities. And I never did it with any intention to monetize that or to live the life that I have now. I did it for me.
Yep.
I needed to learn that stuff. I got diagnosed with a hole in my heart in about 2000 and I can't remember, but I think it was like 2018. I was actually right in the middle of last show and I had to have heart surgery. And I felt like it was a hole that was left from Brian that I had to get fixed to become whole again, if that makes sense. So I had a graft, I had heart surgery, they got through your groin. And it's funny because I look at all these moments in time and all of these things that have plagued me and it's like, wow, like who the heck gets to experience that? So, after I did all that study, I had completely physically changed. I become Loz. I became pink. I became bright. It's taken time to really develop this version of me. But as you said, like an iOS. But people started going, oh my God, like how have you done that? Like how did you go from that girl to all of that? How did you get through it and get out the sun? I'm like, I don't know. But then I realized actually I do know. I could probably reverse engineer and work out what it is that I did and probably repackage that as some sort of replicatable system I could educate people on. And so this is where all of the stuff that I do now came in. I developed a thing called the healthy habit hierarchy, which was based on a few different ideas, but basically following like a hierarchy, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I developed a hierarchy, which is like an operating system, speaking of, using my IT language. It's an operating system to run your life by. So it's 6 M's. It's momentum, menu, mindset, movement, mastery, mentorship. Mentorship got added later. I ended up writing a book about all of this accidentally. I didn't intend to write a book, but I've always written. Even as a child, I used to write a lot of poetry and win awards, and I was very creative in my language. And I realized that people wanted to hear this stuff. So I wrote my first book, got that published, didn't like it. I thought it was a terrible book. And I published with an organization called Balboa Press. And look, it's still out there. You can get it. It's called The Healthy Habit Handbook. It's sterile as. But Dr. John D. Martini, who I interviewed for a podcast that I used to have, he suggested that I publish with them because he goes, it could get picked up by a big publishing house. So I ended up deciding that I wanted to become a personal trainer because it might be a really great gateway to start helping people. When people have something go wrong with their life, when people end up in a situation, they do these big elaborate things to change their life. Like they go to Tony Robbins, they walk on hot coals, they rah-rah, they take a course, they read the book, they listen to the podcast, they do all of these things. But when the map is complex and when the map seems to be pointing in all directions all at once, and when the map seems to be taking us somewhere that we actually never get to, we just have this idea that we take it as a good thing. But if we actually look at our handbrake habits and the things we do every day, we actually start to give ourselves direction. And I realized through that healthy habit hierarchy process that there were 5 of these non-negotiable things that I was doing. So it's like, well, here's an operating system, but what am I doing on a daily level? I read a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits, and I was like, wow, like habits are really important. And I identified these handbrake habits because they act like handbrakes in our life. You can still drive a car with a handbrake on. And most of us are driving with these handbrakes on. So the concept of the handbrake habits emerged, and they're intertwined throughout the healthy habit hierarchy. But what that sparked was a whole new book. I rewrote my first book, got it published the way that I wanted it to get published. It feels amazing. And so I've got a new book called Get the F Unstuck. And I married Michael. I actually married him just after a year after Brian died. We eloped in Las Vegas. I already knew Michael, and he's 15 years my senior. He has a daughter who has a daughter. So I'm G-Ma to a soon-to-be 8-year-old. And I get to work with people every single day in fact, the world's best mojo mentor. It's hard to encapsulate what it is that I do because I have so many different qualifications, but I call myself a mojo mentor and a healthy habit coach. So that's a very big, glittery, sparkly, rainbow-colored nutshell. But I actually just got diagnosed with 2 more brain tumors, and one of them is on my pineal gland. So it's interesting. The tumor that I had in 2014 has come back. It's a little bit bigger. And I have another growth on the gland that regulates your sleep and weight cycle. So it's been an odd it's been an odd year because all of those symptoms of having like dysregulated energy have been really hard. But because I've got those foundational habits, Steve, it's
Yep.
been so much easier to navigate this time around. And, I'm still trying to seek answers. But what I've learned is that the mainstream medical system looks at your body as individual organ systems. So there's a much more easy approach that we can take when we start to look at our bodies as whole people and integrated complex organisms, and finding functional medical people or holistic or integrated medical people has always been a great place for me to sort of sit, because I kind of am all over that stuff. So yeah, it's been
Yep.
quite an interesting ride, but that's how I ended up where I am.
Before we get back into the episode, from time to time you might have a burning question, a guest recommendation, a comment or some feedback, which I always appreciate. If so, I'd love to continue the conversation after this episode, so let's connect. I'm easy to find, but the best place to engage and connect is on Instagram, @TheSteveHodgson. But that's enough from me. Let's get back into the episode.
It's hard. It's hard these days to find the doctors that don't just want to give you a prescription from the chemist, right?
Yep.
And I was seeing a guy years ago, and just before COVID, actually. And then, I got a message. I'd been seeing him for about 6 months because I was going through, fatigue, burnout, anxiety, depression, all those things. And I just got this email one day that said, "Oh, look, my medical license has been suspended because
Wow.
because someone had come back to him and said, oh, you said I had this and that." And it really kind of was a fallout from that. But
It's fickle, isn't it?
for me, when I started hitting not feeling great and I didn't want to go onto medication, I wanted to kind of go, hang on, this body that we've got should be able to fix itself, right? Like,
100%, because it can. It's been doing it
Yeah.
this whole time since humans have walked the earth.
yep. And none of us are going to get out of here alive, right? We're all going to die at some point. We don't know when, right?
Yeah.
But if it's our time to go, when it is our time to go, well, that's it. We're done, right? And that's what the universe has got in for us. But I sat there and I do take antidepressants now that help me. But I take some supplements. I worked with a naturopath, so I kind of went through this and I've kind of balanced it because
Yeah.
when you go through insurance and all those kind of things, stepping out of real estate into kind of not being able to do it anymore, I was like, they're like, basically, but you're not on any kind of, medication. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm really focusing on massage. I'm focusing on exercise. I'm focusing on all these things. And, kind of at one point my doctor said to me, maybe you just need to get on antidepressants to shut them up a little bit, right? Because they were like, well, hang on, what, you're not doing anything here. And I'm like, yes, I am. I'm massage, chiro, emotional neuro technique, all these different kind of health providers. But they didn't want to know. They were
Yeah.
like,
They
no,
don't
no, no,
they
no,
don't
that's-
recognize it, There's the mainstream medical system. Unfortunately, your prescription becomes a subscription.
Yep.
A subscription to a service that's perpetually broken.
Yep.
And it's hard because you're kind of challenged when you have ongoing symptoms and you're trying all of these other peripheral things, yet the medical system don't recognize it. I actually have like words like non-compliant patient written across my medical files. My medical files are huge. There's volumes of them, apparently. I was in
Yep.
hospital and I saw when it was this big and I said, oh, this is really big. He's like, oh, that's just the first part. I'm like, oh my God, that's just
Yep.
the latest part. But it's, what do you do in those moments? I think a lot of us are so misguided because we are kind of we're forced to be put in boxes with things. And it's proof and testament to what you've just said, Steve, that you've got to take a really integrated and complementary approach. So I'm on medication. I stopped my antidepressants and my ADHD medication a while ago. When Brian died, I did take Valium for a while and it helped me to sleep. But I was on lots of medication for my ulcerative colitis. I actually had someone else's gut flora put in my gut last year, very radical $20,000 surgery, getting not someone else's poop put in my gut pretty much to help
Yep.
manage my ulcerative colitis. And I've managed to get off nearly all of that medication at the moment. But it's the same thing. They're like, well, if you're not on that, then what are you taking? And it's almost like I'm appeasing the system. I'm appeasing the system. Otherwise, you get no rebates at anything. And then they don't recognize you having any sort of condition or label. Bloody
Yeah.
hard, man.
Yep. And I find like even I haven't got the long list that you have, but going through the different things that I was diagnosed with, I was like, it's hard to you go through that identity, right? Because it's like that label, like you've got chronic fatigue, which I've been diagnosed with, and then it's like you sit there and you kind of go, I don't really know. Oh, hang on. I'm looking at people that have got chronic fatigue and they're just sitting on a couch and they can't move and they can't work. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there going, how can is this life? But then, I do more research and I go, okay, cool. Well, actually, one of the best things for chronic fatigue is exercise.
Yep. 100%.
So I really for me, I just keep growing and growing and keep researching and thinking. I'm like probably from my rock bottom, I think I'm probably, I reckon 80% back to 100%. And 12 months ago, I was probably 75%, right? So I am just continuing, but a lot of it is stopping the noise that's in the brain, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because the noise, like I say to people from a depression perspective, and I'm a mental health first aid instructor. I was taking a course and I said to this lady, or I said in the course, I said, depression for me, this is how I, kind of explain it, is in the morning, you wake up, you don't want to get out of bed, right? You don't want to go to the gym. You don't want to have a shower. You don't want to get ready. You don't want to eat food. You don't want to exercise. You don't want to do all these things, right? But all those things are the things that will actually make you feel better, right? And she just went, I've got to stop you. And I said, what? And she's like, I have been to doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists. She said, I have never had someone put it like that. She said, so what you're saying is I need to focus on how I feel after those things. And I'm like, yes, because if you let your brain go, I don't feel like getting up. Okay. No, I'm not going to have a shower. I'm not going to get ready. If you go and do all those things, and that's for me now, sometimes in the morning, if I wake up and I don't do my cycle class, or I don't go for a walk, or if I don't exercise, if I don't have a shave and a shower and get ready for the day, because for me, coming out of real estate was shave, shower every day, right? And then if you're going out for something at night, sometimes you'd shave again, And for me, who has shaved since I'm about 12, but you do all these things, and then it was kind of like, oh, I don't have to shave, And I used to just wear sports clothes a lot, and my wife would say to me, Steve, like we need to, you just got sports clothes on, because I was just always doing stuff, and I became obviously more of a stay-at-home dad. And now I wear a lot more clothes and everything, which is great. Obviously, I had gastric sleeve in 2020, which was one of my things, which I was like, I've got to work out is some of my mental health and some of my confidence and some of my fatigue issues, how much of that is linked to being 60 kilos overweight. So I lost almost 60 kilos. I've put a little bit back on, but I am the fittest I have been in my life today. Because I've worked out that the consistency is key, right? So
Yeah.
I started cycling probably 14, 15 months ago. And I remember getting into the first class, I went and sat in the back corner, the darkest, backest corner. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah,
You've been into
that
a
was
cycle
me.
class.
That was me in the gym on the treadmill, backest up,
Yep,
the
yep.
furthest back, darkest corner.
And then I slowly moved into the middle at the back. And then it was probably, I don't know, things happened, mid to late last year that I kind of went, do you know what? Nah. And I went and sat in the front row at the middle. And one of the instructors, who I know quite well, she walked in, she's like, you're in the front row, And I just kind of went, yes, that made me uncomfortable. But as soon as I'd done it, now most of the time I'm in the front row.
Yeah, of
Right?
course.
Like,
Yeah.
And it's just about putting yourself out there. It's about, pushing through that discomfort. And I just love it now. But it's not just the exercise, it's the vibe, it's the people, it's the instructors. It's kind of, the vibe of your tribe, right?
Yeah.
You find your tribe, find the tribe that kind of, it's the environment. You would have an environment
100%,
that
yeah.
you are attracted to and that kind of fills your cup. And then there's environments that we all have that don't fill our cup, that drain our cup.
And I think you've got to choose to try things even though it's hard. I have a saying, which is, I can't, therefore I must. And if there's such a desire that you cannot, my mornings are not dissimilar to yours, where I'm lying in bed, I'm like, oh. I mean, I'm thinking about food though, mind you, because I eat a lot. But it's, oh my gosh, nobody dreams of average. Nobody dreams of an average life. Like, that's not in your dream. You're dreaming about all of these things. So why stop at average? I feel like, yeah, it's going to feel awkward the first time you do it. Like the first time you tried walking, that sucked too. You were a toddler going through that stage, but you kept going, you persisted because you didn't have those lenses of bias that you have. Oh, what if people are looking at me? Oh, judgment, blah, blah, blah. Hard work, uncertainty, pain. There is an element of pain. There's an element of hard work. And there's an element of uncertainty. What if? Do the thing anyway. Go to the front row. Wear the tutu. Have the pink car, the pink top. Like, whatever the thing is, get the surgery. I've had surgery too. Different surgery to you, but I bought boobs. I had a nose job. I couldn't grow those in the gym. In fact, in a gym, you lose this.
Yep.
And I had no surgery to help me breathe, but also while they were there, while we're there, and I'm like, sure. I have a lot of clients that have had, weight loss surgery of some form, or people that are contemplating it. And, as a health expert, I'm always like, yeah, do the thing. Do the thing that if it's going to, let's try some other things. The biggest danger for that is that when you don't support that with the education, and I've seen time and time again, doesn't matter what kind of surgery it is, if it's weight loss surgery or elective surgery of any sort of capacity, do the research and understand where the piper has to get paid. Because with anything that's going to change, any changes that you make to your life, whether it is a habit level or a physiological level, the piper will get paid somewhere. For some people, it's that I can't eat as much. For some people, it's that I have absorption issues. For some people, it's like, actually, I should probably not blend ice cream and just scull it. I think that the piper has to get paid in a way that can be positive though, which is, I'm going to make a choice to do this very consciously. I want to do this because I know it's going to be good for myself, my health, and my confidence. But I'm also going to support that by choosing to educate myself on how can I live a more sustainable and active life so I don't go back to where I was. And what you've just explained is a testament to that, because you can choose to be more active. You can choose to educate yourself nutritionally. And I mean, I look at where I was. It's funny because with my tumor that I have, or the 2 tumors, I've gained 8 kilos. A lot of that's been muscle because I've been training really hard, but I've gained a lot of body fat. I've gone from an extra small to a medium, which for me is scary because I reflect on what I used to look like when I gained all that weight. I'm actually exactly the same weight. So there's this mental trigger because I look at the scales and I see this weight, and there's an association between where I am now and where I was. And it is really hard. There is body dysmorphia at play because I look at myself and I completely look different because my body composition is different. I have a lot more muscle, a lot less fat, but the same thing goes for people that have weight loss surgery or forms of surgery. There's an association there between the old you and the new you, but it's the same you.
Yep.
Right? You've just learned to hone it.
Yeah. And when I'd lost the, 50, 60 kilos, I think it was about 60 kilos at my most. And I was like, I'd look at myself in the mirror and I wouldn't really, it took a while before I actually saw someone that was different in the mirror.
Yeah.
And even when people would be like, oh, Steve, you look great, you look fantastic, all those kind of things. And I don't really focus on the scales anymore because the scales don't tell you. I know that I am a lot more toned now from cycle, and how I feel is more important. It's like,
yes,
jumping on a scale and seeing, oh, you feel fantastic today. Great. That's what I want, right? Yeah. I don't want to, because sometimes you can feel great. And I know in the past when I've been on this weight loss journey is that you'd jump on the scales, you'd had a really good week, you'd eaten really good, and the scales wouldn't represent it. And it was like the scales saying to you, you've done shit. This is crap.
Yep.
You should
100%.
really feel bad about yourself because all the good stuff that you've done, all the good stuff that you've eaten, all the stuff you've done, all the exercise, you're feeling great, but actually it's all shit.
Yeah. And it's this mental game that we play, right? And as a coach, it's been really interesting going back to using objective and subjective data with myself and every single client that I have. A lot of my clients use these rings. We use other tracking devices for biometric
I've got a Whoop
information.
band.
A Whoop is great. And I always do body composition scans. If we have access to a body composition scan, then we always do that, because that actually starts to educate that person on, okay, well, that weight on the scale, if I become welded to that weight having to be a certain number, I'm disregarding my body composition, because what that weight represents is actually an accumulation of the water that's in your body, the weight of your skeleton, the weight of your fat, and the weight of your muscle. And so disproportionately, if as a great coach, because I am one, I can help somebody, manage their water storage, because some people hold a lot of water, especially if their eating is dysregulated. So I help people lose a lot of that extra water weight, but also gain muscle through nutrition interventions, lifting heavy weights if we can, and losing body fat. It's very hard to gain muscle and lose body fat. All of my clients do, because I know how to do it. But this is where that mental game, we have to unfix those patterns, because people will see the scale like it barely changes. But what we can see is that, okay, you may only have lost 0.3 kilos this week, 300 grams. What actually happened is you lost an accumulative amount of all of this body fat and then gained a little bit of muscle.
Yep.
And when people lose weight, they don't realize that normally, without putting nutritional interventions in place and lifting correctly and doing the right kind of exercise, for every kilo of weight that is lost, about 700 grams of that is normally fat, and about 300 grams of that is normally muscle. And we don't want to be losing muscle as we get older, because muscle will dictate the longevity. And, as I said, we're not going out of this alive, but, we want to live good, healthy, stable lives. And we want our lifespan and our health span to match. We don't want this long lifespan and then a shorter health span, and the last 10, 20, 30 years is shithouse, because we don't have quality of life. But it's never too late to start making changes. I work with a lot of people who are a little bit older. They're at a change of life where the kids have left home. They're starting to find who they are and reaffirm their identity. And a lot of people come to me, wanting these amazing goals. And it's pretty cool to be able to work with people like that, because they get to see and feel those results. But it is really important to go, okay, well, I feel great, but where's some objective data? And the more points of measure that we can use, whether it's a scale, weight, girth measurements, body composition measurements, how regularly they go into the toilet, are their clothes fitting differently? Is their skin getting better? There's all of these little tiny subtle things, but when we cumulatively stack them, that is how they see the tangible results of change, because that is what gives people momentum, which is the first M in my hierarchy, to continue that path forward. Because it can be very disheartening if you're on a journey and then, you can't feel any changes. And so, most people give up. We've got to push past that initial period. The 17th to 21st day of any habit change is pretty much where people stop, between day 17 and 21. So they say it takes 66 days to form a habit. I mean, who knows if that's even true? Who's even counting? I do everything in monthly blocks with people. We do a big 12-week mesocycle for change, and then we chunk that down to 4-week cycles. So there's 3 blocks of 4 weeks, making up that 12 weeks. And each week within that 4-week block, everything is programmed. And it's just having a plan, right? I mean, IT brain, if this happens, then this happens. It's just basic logic. So if people have a great plan, it's really easy to get unstuck. In fact, it's actually really easy to go from stuck to unstoppable. But you first of all got to work out how to get unstuck, like you did. You're getting unstuck. It's like, I'm doing this thing. And then plan around that. Have those non-negotiables. You can live an extraordinary life. Life is way too short to be average. So do the thing. Take care of yourself on a daily level. And if you can't, you must.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. Loz, obviously we're always learning and growing. What's one thing you're yet to fully learn about yourself?
That's a really good question. I think my capacity to understand what opportunities exist beyond the scope of my imagination, that is something that I'm constantly playing around with. I understand that to be true. My human design is a manifester. So I constantly will think about something and then it will happen. I actually have I had a goal last year to be on stage as a singer in a band. Didn't happen last year. And then 2 weeks ago, my husband's joined a big band and they needed a backup singer for their big show this weekend. And guess who got asked to do the gig? So
Awesome.
I think realizing that anything is possible, that would be a reframe of what your question was, because it constantly is a reminder that, wow, like where focus goes, energy flows. And if you just put an idea out into the ether, out into the quantum field, somewhere that will pop up for you if you focus on it enough. But you can't just think about, oh, I'm going to manifest this stuff. Do the work. Hard work, uncertainty, and pain. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
Yep. I love, I use a lot of stuff with the universe. You know, it's funny. My kids always say, you know, they just laugh because, you know, we'll drive somewhere and they'll go, oh, how are you going to get a park here, Dad? And I said, universe will work it out.
Yeah.
And then someone pulls out and I pull in and I'm like, see? And they're like, no, Dad, that was just, no, it's the universe. Like, because the thing is it's like when you're trying to look for your wallet, right? Or your phone or your keys. If you're really looking for them, you can't. But as soon as you kind of stop looking for it and just kind of let it go, right? Let life happen, you know, kind of for you, not to you,
Yeah.
right? Things happen, right? And I'm the same, right? I've got stuff that I've put out into the universe from a podcast perspective, from an opportunity perspective, and you know, over time, things just, and you go, oh, or you'll be sitting somewhere and you'll start chatting to someone, and that person links you to something that you need to be linked to. It's crazy.
It's
how
amazing
it
though, but it's amazing and it's fascinating, and call it magic, call it what you want. We've also got to do the work and you've got to sow the seeds. I think we become really attached to time and space horizons, but you know, life is not meant to be sprinted the entire time. In fact, if you sprint too long, you're going to burn out, and you've got to realize you've got moments of sprinting and moments of rest and then moments of running marathons. And it's okay to stop. You don't have to hustle, grind, and push all the time. If you want to live an unstoppable life, it's about finding balance and equilibrating your energy channels constantly. And, you know, the parking spot will always be there.
Yep. Tell me, Loz, what does success mean to you these days?
Success is about showing up even when you can't. Success is about using every single resource at your disposal, even the ones you didn't realize that were there, to put the effort in. As I said 3 minutes ago, the harder you work, the luckier you get, but also understanding that technology has enabled us more than ever in the history of humanity to work so efficiently that knowledge work is where the real power lies. A lot of mechanical tasks are being replaced through technology, but so are a lot of creative tasks through things like, you know, large language models. So success for me is about living a life in the moment all of the time. And that's hard sometimes as ADD, takes me on little side journeys. But success is about embracing the shit show with ease and less resistance, but also jumping all in and saying yes before I've worked out the plan.
Yep. I heard in that, I picked up in that kind of, you know, love yourself, be kind to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Don't put too much pressure on yourself that you've got to do everything. You know, sometimes you've just got to focus that it is what it is.
Yeah, and simplify to amplify. I think as somebody that spent a lifetime juggling all of the balls in the air and never letting them drop and then collapsing in a heap because I didn't have enough energy to do that for too long, make things so simple that you would feel like an idiot not doing the stuff. You know, simplify to amplify. It's literally written everywhere. It's on the back of my phone. Like I've got things written everywhere, right? It's listen to the fact that you don't have to do everything. Choose one thing. Focus on. It doesn't mean you can't do little funny things on the side or whatever, but really focus on one thing at a time, because that's where the juice is. That's where you get to grow. And, you know, feel free to try whatever thing it is that you want, but definitely making things simple is a way of being kinder to yourself.
Yep. Now, one of the questions you've already answered, which was your greatest teacher, and you said your greatest teacher was your dad.
Yeah, my dad and my husband, my first husband. My dad by far, I mean, he has become quite estranged from everybody, not just me, but my other siblings. My sister's really the only person that has contact, and that's because she's an occupational therapist who works with people with mental health and she just treats him like a patient just because she's such a people pleaser. She said, you know, she would feel bad if anything happened and she didn't know, but that's her thing, right? But, you know, it's sad, and I wonder how I would hate to be living a life through the lens that he sees it in. I mean, it'd be very isolating. But my dad has certainly taught me a lot about positive and negative attributes of family. I mean, blood is not thicker than water by any means. And he used to say that to me all the time, blood is thicker than water, blood is thicker than water. No, it's not. And you get to choose who you have in your circle of influence. You become the average of the 5 people you hang around with, right? That's what Jim Rohn talks about. But they don't have to be your biological family. You know, since I removed that toxic energy out of my life, and that was a choice, the people I have called in and the energies that I've called in have been insane. I have more people in my network who I can call upon in a moment of need or a moment of celebration, whatever it is I choose. I've got so many amazing people, and it's growing exponentially all of the time. And your net worth really is in your network. But my dad, the lessons that I learned from that relationship, the hard times and the great times, he was a great dad as a kid, really have informed me about how I want to live my life. And I have a very, very strong, unwavering moral compass with a side of humor and smart-assism. But also, I realize, like, your beliefs and your values are integral to everything that you do. And if you aren't 100% certain about what those things are, how the heck can you have any real direction with your life?
Yep. No, that's awesome. There's been so many awesome gems through the conversation today. If there's someone sitting there, and you've touched on a few things, but if there's someone sitting there that's just really feeling stuck, what's your message to them?
If you are so stuck that it feels painful to move, just remember that there's nothing so hard in your life that there isn't a time, a place, a face, or a space for you to engage with something or someone or an event to help move that emotion through you. That will always exist. When you're in the darkest point where it feels like there's no return, hey, I've been there, believe me. It's so easy to get caught up in the negativity and that spiral of self-destruction where there is no other answer. If you are feeling really stuck, we live in an era where you don't have to have a conversation with someone. Yeah, go find people who you want to be like. Think about the life that you wish that you could have. Like, what would that feel like? What aren't you liking about your circumstances? But to the contrary, oppose that with what you want. So there's an equal amount of pros and cons to equilibrate, right? You may not need to have an actual conversation with the types of people that you want to be with, but find a podcast, read a book, find a whole heap of people. There are no excuses for not getting yourself unstuck in 2025 or beyond, because all of that information is at our fingertips. I remember in my darkest moments, I don't want to talk to anybody. That's when I started listening to podcasts. So I just found the people that I wanted to be like, and I started listening to the podcast, and passively I was just being rewired, repatterned in the way I was thinking about my life. And that was just so powerful, because in those moments where I couldn't speak, they say, you know, it ain't weak to speak. Well, actually, it's fucking hard to speak, sorry. But when you are so stuck and embedded in the depths of that despair, maybe it's not speaking that's the thing. A time, a space, a place, and a face.
Yep. Awesome. Now, for those that want to reach out to you, Loz, where's the best place to find you?
Well, I try and be everywhere, Steve. So the best place is my website. So that's Loz Life, LOZLIFE.com. You can put the .au and I am international. You'll get to the same destination anyway. But find me on social media. You can find that under my name, Loz Antonenko. You say it and spell it the same way. So Loz Antonenko. And I also have a book out. It's called Get the F Unstuck. Bright yellow background with me doing this. Not photoshopped, my rubber face. But I'm always happy to answer questions. I get hundreds of DMs a week, and I respond to every one of them. If you comment on any of my content on social media, I will respond to you. If you're not sure, send me a voice message, send me a subtle email. However it is, I'm always here to help. I am an absolute helpaholic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I am really appreciative and grateful for your time today, Loz. It's been awesome to connect, and we'll have to catch up in person sometime.
We will, absolutely. Thank you so much for a wonderful chat today, Steve, and look after yourself.
Yeah, I will do. You too.
Ciao
All
for
right.
now.
Thanks, Loz.